The day my son told me I was too elderly for Christmas dinner was the day I decided to rewrite my will. After 47 years of motherhood, 3 decades of professional success, and a lifetime of careful financial planning, I discovered I was nothing more than an inconvenience to the very people I had sacrificed everything for. That revelation hurt worse than the arthritis that had slowly claimed my hands after years of typing financial reports. But what my family didn't realize as they uninvited me from their table was that I controlled a $20 million fortune, and I was about to ensure they'd never see a penny of it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Josephine Merritt. At 67, I'd built a life most would envy. After losing my husband Rowan to cancer 12 years ago, I'd transformed our modest investment portfolio into a small fortune through careful strategy and an uncanny talent for recognizing emerging market trends. My career at Westlake Financial had earned me the nickname the Oracle among my colleagues. While I never flaunted my wealth, I took quiet pride in knowing my son Dresden and his family would someday inherit comfort beyond anything they'd imagined. Dresden had always been ambitious, perhaps too ambitious. As a child, he'd demand 2 bedtime stories instead of 1, insist on extra dessert, negotiate later curfews as a teenager. I admired his determination, even when it sometimes bordered on entitlement. When he married Cordelia Voss, the daughter of pharmaceutical executives, I welcomed her into our family with open arms and an open heart, despite her tendency to appraise everything and everyone in terms of their market value. They settled in Thornfield Estates, an exclusive neighborhood that stretched their combined incomes to the breaking point. I watched them struggle silently for 3 years before offering assistance. "This is just a small gift," I'd said, transferring $300,000 into their account. "Consider it an advance on your inheritance. No strings attached." The relief on Dresden's face had been worth every penny. "Mom, I don't know what to say," he'd stammered, eyes welling with tears. "Use it wisely," I'd replied. "That's thanks. Enough." They used some of it to renovate their home, transforming it into a showcase that soon appeared in Architectural Horizon magazine. Cordelia launched her interior design business, Aurelia Interiors, catering to the elite of Thornfield Estates and beyond. Dresden upgraded his car to the luxury model he'd coveted. None of this bothered me. I wanted them to enjoy life while they were young enough to truly savor it. What I hadn't told them was that the gift represented less than 2% of my total assets. After a lifetime of prudent living and strategic investments, I'd amassed just over $20 million, a fact known only to myself and my financial advisor, the unflappable Octavia Winters. "Your generosity is admirable," Octavia had remarked after I'd signed the transfer papers. "But remember, Josephine, generosity without boundaries often invites exploitation." I'd laughed off her concern. "Their family, Octavia, they'd never exploit me." Those words would return to haunt me many times in the years that followed. With the financial pressure eased, Dresden and Cordelia blossomed socially. Their circle expanded to include the Harrimans, the Coltranes, and the notorious Westbrook family, whose old money had influenced local politics for generations. I was invited to their dinner parties initially, but gradually, the invitations became less frequent. "It's just shop talk, Mom," Dresden would explain. "Boring business networking. You'd hate it." I didn't press the issue. Instead, I focused on my grandchildren, Emerson, Marlo, and little Zadie. They became my world. While Dresden and Cordelia climbed social ladders, I drove carpool, attended school concerts, supervised homework, and created the kind of memories I treasured from my own childhood. I taught Emerson to play chess, helped Marlo discover her passion for astronomy, and spent countless hours reading to Zadie, whose imagination seemed as boundless as the night sky. On weekends, I often took them to my lakeside cabin in Mistwood Cove, a secluded paradise I'd purchased with my first major investment returns. There, we'd swim in summer, ice skate in winter, and gather around bonfires to roast marshmallows and tell stories as stars wheeled overhead. "Why don't Mom and Dad ever come here?" Marlo asked once, gazing across the moonlit lake. "They're busy building their futures," I'd answered carefully. Sometimes adults forget to pause and look at the stars. What I didn't say was that Cordelia had dismissed my beloved cabin as rustic and primitive, despite its modern amenities and stunning location. "Honestly, Josephine," she'd remarked during her single visit, "I don't understand why you keep this place when you could afford a condo in Milan or a villa in Saint-Tropez." She couldn't see that the cabin's value wasn't in its market price but in the memories it held. Rowan teaching Dresden to fish off the dock, our family gatherings when my sister Beatrice was still alive, the quiet mornings when mist rose from the water like dreams taking flight. Some treasures can't be measured in dollars. The children understood, though. They treasured our weekends at the lake, collecting pine cones and interesting rocks, spotting deer at dawn, falling asleep to the sound of loons calling across the water. During those precious days, I felt truly alive, truly valued. Back at their home, however, I increasingly felt like an accessory, useful for childcare and household management, but otherwise unnecessary. Dresden's calls became perfunctory, usually ending with requests. "Mom, can you take Emerson to his dental appointment? Thursday? We've got the Westbrook Gala." Or, "Would you mind keeping the kids overnight? Cordelia's showcasing a project in Oak Ridge." I never refused. How could I? These were my grandchildren, my flesh and blood. If helping with them meant Dresden and Cordelia could advance professionally, wasn't that worthwhile? Besides, each bedtime story, each scraped knee bandaged, each proud moment witnessed was its own reward. What I failed to notice was how completely I'd been relegated to the role of unpaid nanny. The invitations to family dinners grew sparse, then non-existent. When I did join them, conversations would halt awkwardly upon my arrival, resuming only after I'd left the room. I told myself they were just being considerate. Why burden me with their business concerns or social politics? The truth, as it turned out, was far less charitable. The awakening came gradually. First, there was the dinner party I unexpectedly walked in on when dropping off Zadie's forgotten science project. The house was filled with voices and laughter, the Harrimans, the Coltranes, even old Judge Westbrook himself. Dresden's eyes had widened when he saw me at the door. "Mom, what a surprise!" he'd exclaimed, firmly blocking the entrance. "I brought Zadie's volcano model," I'd said, peering past him at the elegant table setting visible through the foyer. "You're having a party?" "Just an impromptu business thing," he'd replied, taking the project. "Thanks for this. I'll call you tomorrow." The door had closed before I could respond. Then there was the conversation I overheard between Cordelia and her friend Vivica while waiting to pick up the children from their private school's autumn concert. They sat just around the corner from me, unaware of my presence. "So you actually got Josephine to fund the entire Meridian project?" Vivica had asked, her voice hushed but clear. Cordelia's laugh had a brittle edge. "She doesn't even realize. Dresden just hints at some financial pressure, looks worried for a few days, and she's practically throwing money at us to help. We've renovated 3 properties with her gifts already. And she never wants anything in return? No equity? No input? God, no. She's from that generation that thinks family helps family without conditions. It's quaint, really. Useful, but quaint." "You're lucky," Vivica had sighed. "My in-laws expect board positions and profit percentages for every dime they invest." "That's because they understand business," Cordelia had replied. "Josephine just understands guilt. She worked so much when Dresden was young, he barely saw her. Now she's making up for lost time by bankrolling his adulthood." I'd stood frozen, my heart hammering painfully. Their words confirmed suspicions I'd been suppressing for years. The financial emergencies that had prompted my additional gifts, $250,000 for unexpected foundation repairs, $180,000 for Aurelia Interiors expansion, $125,000 when Dresden's investment in his friend's startup supposedly tanked. Had they all been fabrications? Still, I said nothing. What would confronting them accomplish except creating family strife? Instead, I quietly instructed Octavia to pause any further financial assistance without explicit documentation. "About time," she'd remarked, updating my portfolio. "I was beginning to think you'd forgotten the difference between generosity and gullibility." "I haven't forgotten," I'd replied. "I just hoped I was wrong." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The final blow, the one that shattered all illusions, came 3 weeks before Christmas. I'd been helping decorate the enormous blue spruce in their foyer, a tradition we'd maintained since Dresden was small enough to need lifting to place ornaments on higher branches. The children and I were hanging the antique glass balls I'd collected over decades when Dresden and Cordelia returned from their lunch with the Westbrooks. "It's looking magical, Grandma Jo," Zadie had exclaimed, carefully attaching a delicate silver star to a lower branch. "We're making memories," I'd replied, smiling as Emerson and Marlowe argued good-naturedly about garland placement. Cordelia had assessed the tree with a critical eye. "The theme this year is Winter Wonderland in silver and ice blue," she'd announced. "Those colored ornaments don't really work with the aesthetic." I'd glanced at the children's crestfallen faces. "But we always use the family ornaments. Each one has a story." "That was fine when the children were smaller," Cordelia had said dismissively. "But this year we're hosting the Westbrook family for Christmas dinner. Judge Westbrook's daughter Persephone is a design influencer with over 2 million followers. Everything needs to be curated." A heavy silence had fallen. Even at 12, Emerson understood the implication. "But Grandma Jo's ornaments are our tradition," he'd protested. Dresden had cleared his throat. "About Christmas, Mom, we've been meaning to talk to you." Something in his tone had made me pause, a glass snowflake suspended from my fingers. "What? About Christmas?" Cordelia and Dresden exchanged glances. "Why don't you kids go upstairs and finish your homework?" Dresden suggested. Once they'd reluctantly departed, Dresden had gestured toward the living room. "Let's sit, Mom." I'd followed them, hanging the snowflake on a branch as I passed. It caught the light, sending prisms dancing across the foyer. A final moment of magic before everything changed. "We've been invited to join the Westbrooks Foundation Board," Dresden began once we were seated. "It's an incredible opportunity. They fund arts initiatives across the country. Judge Westbrook rarely extends these invitations outside his immediate circle." "That's wonderful," I'd said sincerely. "Congratulations." "The thing is," Cordelia interjected, "the Westbrooks are very traditional about certain things. Their holiday gathering is one of them. Very formal, very structured." I nodded, not yet understanding where this was heading. "I'll wear my navy dress with the pearl buttons. It's quite elegant." Dresden shifted, uncomfortably. "It's not just about attire, Mom. The Westbrooks have certain expectations about the dynamics of these events." "What Dresden is trying to say," Cordelia continued, her voice taking on the practiced patience one might use with a difficult child, "is that the Christmas dinner is specifically for active business associates and their immediate household family. It's not a casual family gathering. It's essentially a business function that happens to fall on Christmas." The room seemed to grow colder. "I'm not immediate family?" Dresden wouldn't meet my eyes. "Of course you are, Mom. It's just that." "Well, The Westbrooks are particular about the age range of their gatherings. They believe it creates a certain atmosphere, a certain energy. An age range? I repeated, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Cordelia nodded, seemingly relieved I was catching on. Exactly. Everyone at the table will be under 60. It's just their preference. Nothing personal. Nothing personal, I echoed. You're excluding me from Christmas dinner with my only grandchildren because I'm too old, and it's nothing personal? Dresden winced. Mom, please don't put it like that. We're just trying to navigate some complex social waters here. This connection to the Westbrooks could secure the children's future. Their foundation could fund Emerson's college, support Marlowe's scientific aspirations. Judge Westbrook's endorsement opens doors we couldn't access otherwise, Cordelia added. Surely you understand we have to respect their preferences, unconventional as they might seem. I sat very still, years of business negotiations having taught me the value of composure in moments of crisis. And what do the children think about spending Christmas without their grandmother? Another uncomfortable exchange of glances. We thought we'd bring them to your place the day after, Dresden offered. You could do your own Christmas celebration then. I see. I stood up slowly, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from my slacks. And what reason will you give them for my absence at the actual Christmas dinner? Cordelia smiled blandly. We'll simply explain that sometimes adults have separate celebrations, just like they might have separate birthday parties with different groups of friends. The comparison, equating my relationship with my grandchildren to casual friendship, struck like a physical blow. But decades in finance had taught me when to hold and when to fold. This was not the moment for confrontation. If you'll excuse me, I said quietly, I think I'll head home now. Mom, don't be upset, Dresden pleaded, following me to the foyer. It's just one dinner. I paused by the tree, gazing at the collection of ornaments we'd hung. Tangible. Pieces of our family history now deemed aesthetically unsuitable. It's never just one dinner, Dresden. It's a choice about what, and who, truly matters. As I reached for my coat, Marlowe appeared at the top of the stairs. Grandma Jo, are you leaving? We haven't finished the tree. Another time, sweetheart, I called up, forcing brightness into my voice. Grandma has some important things to take care of. Driving home through the early winter darkness, I felt something crystallize within me. A clarity I hadn't experienced since the days after Rowan's death when I'd had to reimagine my entire future. I wasn't angry. I was awake. The family I'd sacrificed for, the son I'd championed, the grandchildren I adored, they existed within a household that valued status over connection, appearance over substance, social climbing over familial bonds. I wasn't being excluded from a dinner. I was being erased from the narrative. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd made my decision. The next morning, I called Octavia and requested an urgent meeting. Bring the estate planning documents, I instructed. All of them. It's time for a complete revision. Significant changes? She'd asked, professional as always. You might say that, I replied. I've just discovered what my legacy shouldn't be. 2 days later, I sat across from Octavia in her office as she reviewed my new instructions, her expression shifting from surprise to something approaching admiration. This is unprecedented in my experience, she remarked, setting down her pen. Are you absolutely certain? I thought of the ornaments being removed from the tree, of conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, of the casual cruelty in Cordelia's voice as she dismissed decades of tradition. Most of all, I thought of the look on Dresden's face as he explained why his mother wasn't welcome at Christmas dinner. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, I answered. Now tell me about the Thornfield Scholarship Foundation again. I believe $20 million could fund quite a few dreams, especially for students without family support. Octavia smiled slowly. The Westbrooks have been the primary donors since its inception. With your contribution, you'd essentially be taking over their position as lead benefactor. The foundation would likely be renamed in your honor. I leaned back in my chair, a sense of purpose washing through me. Perfect. And the cabin? As discussed, it would go into a trust for your grandchildren, accessible when they turn 25, with the stipulation that it can never be sold or commercially developed. And Dresden and Cordelia? Octavia consulted her notes. A token, inheritance of $5,000 each, as required by law to prevent contestation of the will. For a moment, I pictured their faces when they learned the truth, that the mother they'd dismissed as too elderly for their prestigious dinner table had redirected a fortune they'd assumed was their birthright, not to punish them, but to preserve something more valuable than money, integrity. Excellent, I said, reaching for the pen. Let's make it official. As I drove away from Octavia's office, a peculiar lightness filled my chest. For the first time in years, I felt unburdened, not just from financial expectations, but from the weight of constant disappointment. The revised will was like a declaration of independence, though one my family wouldn't discover until much later. Back at my condominium, I made myself a cup of Earl Grey tea and settled onto the balcony overlooking Stillwater Park. The afternoon light filtered through nearly bare branches, casting intricate shadows across the lawn where children played despite the December chill. Their laughter carried upward, reminding me of Dresden's childhood, before status and appearances consumed his world. My phone buzzed. Dresden's name appeared on the screen. "Mom, I hope you're not still upset about Christmas," he began without preamble. "We've been thinking, and we'd like to invite you to the Christmas Eve cocktail reception before the dinner. The Westbrooks wouldn't mind that at all. It's just the formal dinner that has the restrictions." I took a slow sip of tea before answering. "That's thoughtful of you, Dresden. What time should I arrive?" He sounded relieved by my apparent acquiescence. 7 to 9. Nothing elaborate. Just champagne and canapes. You could see the children before their bedtime. "I'll be there," I promised, surprised by how steady my voice remained. After hanging up, I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Lucinda Hargrave had been Judge Westbrook's executive assistant for nearly 30 years before her retirement. We'd met at various charity functions over the years, developing a friendly rapport based on our shared appreciation for direct speech and minimal nonsense. "Josephine Merritt," she answered warmly. "To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" "Lucinda, I'm in need of some social intelligence," I replied. "Are you still in contact with your former employer?" Her laugh was dry as autumn leaves. "Fortnightly lunches without fail. The judge may be semi-retired, but he still relies on me to keep him informed of all the relevant gossip." "What's your interest in Atticus Westbrook?" I explained the situation, Dresden and Cordelia's networking ambitions, the Christmas dinner, exclusion, my suspicions about the judge's supposed age restrictions for social events. Lucinda's ensuing silence spoke volumes before she finally responded. "Josephine, I've organized Atticus Westbrook's holiday gatherings for 27 years. I can assure you with absolute certainty that he has never, not once, expressed any preference regarding the age of his dinner guests. In fact, his own mother attended every Christmas until her passing at 92. Though I'd suspected as much, hearing it confirmed sent a cold current through me. "I see. Furthermore," Lucinda continued, "Atticus values family connections deeply. It's one of his core principles in both business and personal matters. He frequently says that how a person treats their family, particularly older generations, reveals their true character." "How interesting," I murmured, watching a maple leaf spiral down from a nearby tree. "If I may speak frankly," Lucinda added, "your son and his wife seem to be gravely miscalculating the impression they'll make on the judge. Excluding a parent from a family holiday would not sit well with him at all." "Thank you for your candor," I said. I have one more question, if you don't mind. Does Judge Westbrook have any particular connection to the Thornfield Scholarship Foundation? It's his passion project, Lucinda replied immediately. He established it 30 years ago after his own nephew received a life-changing scholarship. Atticus believes educational access is the great equalizer in society. Why do you ask? Just considering some year-end charitable contributions, I answered casually. Lucinda, you've been tremendously helpful. Could I impose upon you for one small favor? By the time we ended our call 15 minutes later, the foundations of a plan had solidified in my mind. Not one of vengeance, but of reclamation, of my dignity, my agency, and perhaps something even more precious, the truth. Over the next week, I maintained a careful normalcy in my interactions with Dresden and Cordelia. When Emerson called, distressed about my Christmas Day absence, I assured him we'd have our own special celebration. Christmas isn't about a specific day, sweetheart. It's about the love we share whenever we're together. But it won't be the same, he'd protested. Marlo is already saying she won't eat Christmas dinner if you're not there. That's very loyal of her, I'd replied, blinking back unexpected tears. But I want you all to enjoy yourselves. No protests, no sadness. Promise me? He'd grudgingly agreed, though his dissatisfaction remained evident. Meanwhile, I continued my preparations. First, a meeting with the directors of the Thornfield Scholarship Foundation, where my proposal was met with astounded delight. Mrs. Merritt, a contribution of this magnitude would transform our capabilities, the chairwoman had explained. We currently assist 47 students annually. With your gift, we could support hundreds, perhaps even establish an endowment. That's precisely my hope, I'd replied. With one condition, I wish to attend your holiday reception on December 23rd and make the announcement personally. Next, I visited my attorney, Serena Blackwell, to finalize the trust for Mistwood Cove. This ensures the property remains in your grandchildren's names, she explained, while preventing any attempt to sell or develop it before they reach the stipulated age. And it cannot be contested, I confirmed. The trust takes effect immediately, Serena assured me. It's already separated from your estate. Your son and daughter-in-law have no legal avenue to challenge it. Finally, I met with Professor Nadia Kaminsky, the fiercely brilliant head of the university's architecture department. Years earlier, I'd funded her groundbreaking research on sustainable urban housing, not because it promised financial returns, but because I believed in her vision. Now, I sought her expertise for a different purpose. Of course I remember Cordelia Voss, Nadia remarked, adjusting her distinctive, red-framed glasses. She took my advanced design seminar 8 years ago. Technically talented but conceptually derivative. Why do you ask? I slid a glossy magazine across her desk. This showcase home recently earned her considerable attention in Architectural Horizon. I'd appreciate your professional assessment. Nadia flipped through the spread, her expression growing increasingly troubled. These designs, they're not merely inspired by Esmeralda Torres's work. These are direct appropriations with minimal alterations. She looked up sharply. Has Torres seen these? I don't believe so, I replied. She's quite remote, isn't she? Still living in that mountain studio in Andalusia? By choice, Nadia confirmed. She values her privacy almost as much as her intellectual property. She tapped the magazine, thoughtfully. Josephine, what exactly are you planning? I smiled gently. Simply ensuring that credit flows where it's due. Would you happen to have Esmeralda's contact information? The Christmas Eve cocktail reception arrived crisp and clear, stars sharp as diamond chips against the winter sky. I selected my outfit, with meticulous care, a tailored burgundy velvet suit with subtle gold embroidery at the lapels, elegant without being ostentatious, age-appropriate without being matronly. My makeup was minimal, My silver hair swept into a simple French twist secured with my mother's antique jade pins. At precisely 7 o'clock, I rang the doorbell at Dresden and Cordelia's home, bearing tastefully wrapped gifts for the children and a rare vintage port for the adults. A server I didn't recognize opened the door, confirming my suspicion that this was no casual family gathering, but a carefully orchestrated social performance. The foyer had been transformed. The family ornaments had indeed disappeared from the tree, replaced by coordinated silver and ice blue decorations that gleamed coldly under strategic lighting. The ancient Persian rug, a wedding gift from Rowan's parents, had been replaced with something cream-colored and brutally modern. Even the family photographs that usually lined the hallway had vanished, supplanted by abstract art pieces that conveyed nothing beyond their decorative function. It was as if my son's home had been stripped of memory, sanitized of history, readied for the approval of people who had no connection to our shared past. "Grandma Joe!" Zadie spotted me first, breaking away from a group of children to barrel into my arms. At 7, she still possessed the uncomplicated affection that older children learn to moderate in public settings. "You came. I told Emerson you would." I hugged her tightly, breathing in the clean scent of her hair. "I wouldn't miss seeing you tonight, sunshine." Marlo approached next, her movements more measured at 11 but her eyes bright with genuine pleasure. "Mom said you'll come to our house the day after tomorrow for another Christmas." "That's right," I confirmed. "We'll have our own celebration." Emerson hung back, his 12-year-old dignity preventing the exuberant greeting his siblings had offered, but the relief in his expression spoke volumes. I crossed to him, respecting his newfound reserve by simply squeezing his shoulder. "You look very handsome in that suit, young man." His posture relaxed slightly. "Dad made me wear a tie. It's choking me." "A small sacrifice for grandeur," I said solemnly, prompting a reluctant smile. Dresden appeared then, looking simultaneously pleased and anxious at my arrival. "Mom, you're right on time. Come meet everyone. The Coltranes are eager to reconnect, and the Harrimans brought their son who's considering Westlake Financial for an internship." I allowed him to guide me through the crowded living room, exchanging pleasantries with faces both familiar and unknown. The conversation flowed easily. Decades navigating corporate circles had equipped me well for such environments. If anyone was surprised by my poise or articulation, if they'd expected a doddering caricature based on Dresden and Cordelia's representations, they concealed it admirably. Cordelia circulated through the room like a hummingbird, never alighting anywhere for long, her laughter too bright, her gestures too expansive. She wore an architectural white sheath dress that emphasized her slender frame, her dark hair swept into a severe updo that contrasted sharply with the soft holiday decor. When our paths crossed, her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Josephine, how lovely you could join us for the reception," she said, her emphasis on the last word subtle but unmistakable. "The children were so looking forward to seeing you." "Yes, I gathered from Emerson that they're quite disappointed about tomorrow's arrangements," I replied mildly. Something flickered behind her eyes, annoyance perhaps, or concern that the children had expressed discontent. "They'll have a wonderful time. Judge Westbrook's grandniece is exactly Marlowe's age. We're hoping they'll become friends." "How convenient," I murmured. Before she could respond, the doorbell chimed. Cordelia's expression shifted to one of barely contained excitement. "That must be the Westbrooks. Dresden, darling, would you?" My son hurried to the door with the eager deference of a courtier awaiting royalty. The conversation in the room dimmed expectantly, then swelled again as Judge Atticus Westbrook entered, accompanied by a striking woman in her 60s with a silver bob and penetrating dark eyes, his wife, Imogen, and a younger couple I presumed to be their son and daughter-in-law. Judge Westbrook was taller than I expected, his posture military straight despite his 75 years. His white hair contrasted sharply with bushy black eyebrows that gave him a perpetually questioning expression. He moved through the room with the unhurried confidence of someone accustomed to having his presence acknowledged without having to demand attention. Dresden performed the introductions with careful precision, presenting each guest as if offering rare specimens for the judge's consideration. When he reached me, I noted a barely perceptible hesitation. "And this is my mother, Josephine Merritt," he said finally. Judge Westbrook extended his hand, his grip firm but not aggressive. "Mrs. Merritt, a pleasure. I believe we served on the Library Expansion Committee together some years ago, though we were never formally introduced." "Indeed we did, Judge Westbrook," I replied. "You championed the Digital Access Initiative for rural communities. An admirable position that was well ahead of its time." His eyebrows rose slightly, perhaps surprised by my recollection of a project from nearly a decade prior. "You have an excellent memory." "Selective, perhaps," I smiled. "I tend to remember worthwhile endeavors." Something in his expression shifted, a flicker of genuine interest replacing polite conversational engagement. "Josephine Merritt," he repeated, as if testing the name. "Not the Josephine Merritt who guided Westlake Financial through the 2008 crisis? The Oracle, as I recall some called you." I inclined my head modestly. "An exaggerated nickname, but yes, that was my role." "Hardly exaggerated," he countered. "Your strategy became a case study at business schools nationwide. My own portfolio benefited significantly from following your publicly shared insights." Dresden's expression had transformed from anxious pride to utter bewilderment. Cordelia hovered nearby, her smile frozen in place as she attempted to process this unexpected turn in the conversation. "You're too kind, Judge," I demurred. "Though, I admit, financial forecasting has always been something of a passion. Even in retirement, I find myself analyzing market patterns almost reflexively." "A valuable perspective," Judge Westbrook noted. "I've always maintained that seasoned judgment is an undervalued asset in today's business environment. Too many companies discard their most experienced minds in favor of younger, less tested talents." He glanced briefly at Dresden before continuing. "Tell me, will you be joining us for dinner tomorrow? I'd be most interested in hearing your thoughts on the emerging Asian markets." The moment crystallized around us. Judge Westbrook's direct gaze, Dresden's sudden pallor, Cordelia's barely concealed dismay. I allowed the silence to extend just long enough to become uncomfortable before responding. "I'm afraid not," I said finally. "I have a prior commitment tomorrow evening." "What a shame," the judge replied, genuine disappointment evident in his tone. "Perhaps another occasion then." "Actually," I continued, "I'll be attending the Thornfield Scholarship Foundation's holiday reception tomorrow night. I understand. It's a cause close to your heart." His interest visibly deepened. "Indeed it is. Though I wasn't aware you had a connection to the foundation." "A recent development," I explained. "I've been considering various philanthropic opportunities, and their mission particularly resonated with me." "Well then," he said warmly, "it seems we'll have that conversation after all, just in a different setting. Imogen and I never miss the foundation reception." Cordelia interjected with barely concealed anxiety. "How lovely! But surely nothing compares to Christmas dinner with family, does it, Josephine? Perhaps you could attend the reception another time?" Judge Westbrook turned to her, his bushy eyebrows drawing together. "Family Christmas traditions are indeed sacred, Mrs. Blackett. I'm surprised you wouldn't prioritize having your mother-in-law at your table." Cordelia's smile remained fixed, though a flush crept up her neck. "Oh, we absolutely would normally. It's just that this year, with the children at certain ages and the dynamics of the gathering." "The dynamics?" Judge Westbrook repeated, his tone suddenly cooler. Dresden stepped in hurriedly. What my wife means is that we completely understand Mom's commitment to the foundation. We'll celebrate with her the following day instead. Judge Westbrook studied them both, with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, something between curiosity and assessment. I see, he said finally. Well, Mrs. Merritt, I look forward to continuing our conversation tomorrow evening. Perhaps you might share your perspective on the Foundation's endowment strategy. I've been advocating for a more diversified approach for some time. I'd be delighted, I replied. In fact, I have some specific proposals in mind that might interest you. As our conversation drew to a natural close and Judge Westbrook moved on to greet other guests, Dresden pulled me aside, his expression a study in conflicted emotions. Mom, he whispered urgently, you never mentioned you knew Judge Westbrook, or that you were attending the foundation reception tomorrow. You never asked about my holiday plans, I pointed out gently. You simply informed me I wouldn't be included in yours. His face flushed. That's not fair. We explained the situation. Did you? I held his gaze steadily. Did you explain to Judge Westbrook that you excluded me from Christmas dinner because of my age? Because that seemed to surprise him considerably. Dresden glanced anxiously. Across the room, where Judge Westbrook was now engaged in animated conversation with Emerson about the chess set displayed in the corner. Mom, please don't create a scene. This evening is important to us. I'm aware of how important it is, I assured him. That's why I haven't mentioned to the judge that you lied about his preferences regarding the age of his dinner guests. The color drained from Dresden's face. What are you talking about? Judge Westbrook has never instituted any age restrictions for his gatherings, I said quietly. In fact, his own mother attended his Christmas dinners well into her 90s. That's not possible, Dresden stammered. Cordelia specifically said. Yes, I interrupted. What did Cordelia specifically say? And where did she get that information? Before he could respond, Cordelia materialized beside us, her voice low but intense. Josephine, I couldn't help noticing you've made quite an impression on Judge Westbrook. How fortunate. Quite unexpected, I agreed mildly. Especially, given your concerns about how someone my age might impact the dinner's atmosphere. Her smile remained in place, though it didn't reach her eyes. Oh, you know how these things can be misinterpreted. Perhaps we were overly cautious. In fact, now that it's clear the judge enjoys your company, we should absolutely reconsider tomorrow's arrangements. How adaptable of you, I remarked. But as I mentioned, I've already committed to the foundation reception. Surely they would understand if you canceled, she pressed. Family should come first, after all. The irony was so pronounced I almost laughed. Instead, I patted her arm gently. I completely agree. Family should come first. How wonderful that we share that value. Before she could formulate a response, I excused myself to speak with the children, who had been watching our exchange with undisguised curiosity. As I moved away, I heard Cordelia hiss to Dresden, "Fix this, now." The remainder of the evening unfolded with a peculiar dual reality. The surface glitter of holiday festivities overlaying increasingly desperate attempts by Dresden and Cordelia to salvage their carefully constructed narrative. Judge Westbrook, perhaps sensing undercurrents he didn't fully understand, made a point of engaging me in conversation several more times, each exchange further undermining the pretense that had been created about my suitability as a dinner guest. When it came time for me to leave, I sought out each grandchild for a private farewell. To Zadie, I gave a delicate music box that played her favorite lullaby. To Marlowe, a vintage astronomical guide with hand-colored plates. And to Emerson, a chess set carved from olive wood, each piece uniquely textured, with a warmth no mass-produced set could match. I thought we were exchanging gifts the day after tomorrow, he said, running his fingers over the smooth contours of a knight. Consider this an early surprise, I told him. Something special, just between us. As I gathered my coat, Judge, Westbrook approached once more. "Until tomorrow, Mrs. Merritt. I'm quite looking forward to it." "As am I replied sincerely. Dresden escorted me to the door, his expression strained. "Mom, about tomorrow. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We'd really like you to join us for dinner. I'm sure the foundation would understand if you sent regrets." I regarded my son. This man I'd raised, educated, supported, and loved unconditionally for more than 4 decades, and felt a complicated mixture of affection and sadness. "The misunderstanding," I said gently, "isn't about tomorrow's plans. Dresden. It's about what truly constitutes wealth, something I hope you'll discover before it's too late." Before he could respond, I kissed his cheek and stepped into the crisp December night, leaving him framed in the doorway of his impressive home, surrounded by all the trappings of success yet missing its substance entirely. The stars overhead seemed particularly brilliant as I drove home, each one a distant fire burning with patient, enduring light. Tomorrow would bring its own revelations, some public, others private. The Thornfield Scholarship Foundation would receive its transformative gift. Judge Westbrook would understand the true character of those seeking his favor. And my family would begin to comprehend that some inheritances, once squandered, can never be reclaimed. Yet even amid these consequential matters, what occupied my thoughts most as I navigated the quiet streets was simpler. The look in Emerson's eyes as he examined his chess set, Marlowe's delight at the star charts, Zadie's wonder as the music, Bach's played its gentle melody. These moments, these connections, were the real wealth I'd accumulated over a lifetime. No one could diminish their value or dictate their worth. For the first time since being excluded from Christmas dinner, I felt a genuine sense of peace. Tomorrow would bring its own form of justice, but tonight, driving beneath the winter stars, I had already reclaimed something far more precious than money or status. The certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be, following a path aligned with my deepest values. And in that alignment, I had found freedom. The Thornfield Scholarship Foundation's holiday reception was held in the grand ballroom of the Harrington Hotel, a century-old landmark with soaring ceilings and Art Deco details that had survived numerous renovation attempts by modernizing hoteliers. I arrived precisely at 7, wearing a midnight blue evening gown with subtle beading that caught the light as I moved, elegant without being ostentatious, refined without trying to appear younger than my years. The event was already in full swing, the room filled with the city's philanthropic elite, engaging in the carefully choreographed dance of social and charitable networking. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, while a string quartet played softly in the corner, their classical selections providing a cultured backdrop to the evening's proceedings. "Mrs. Merritt!" Evelyn Thornfield herself approached as I handed my wrap to the coat check attendant. In her mid-70s, Evelyn retained the athletic bearing of the championship swimmer she'd been in her youth. Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine. "I'm delighted you could join us tonight. Your contribution has already created quite a stir among our board members. I appreciate your discretion in keeping the details confidential until the formal announcement," I replied. "Of course," she nodded. "Though I must confess, it's been difficult to contain my excitement. A gift of this magnitude will transform what we're able to achieve." She gestured toward the center of the room where clusters of people engaged in animated conversation. "Judge Westbrook has been asking about you. He seemed quite intrigued when I mentioned you'd be making a significant announcement this evening. We had a brief but pleasant conversation yesterday," I explained. "He wasn't aware of my connection to the foundation." Evelyn's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Few people are, my dear," which will make tonight all the more memorable. She took my arm. "Come, let me introduce you to some of our scholarship recipients. Their stories are the true heart of our work." For the next hour, I mingled among the guests, meeting current and former scholarship students whose lives had been changed by the foundation's support. There was Malik Jefferson, now completing his medical residency after growing up in foster care. Sophia Chen, whose groundbreaking research in sustainable agriculture stemmed from childhood experiences of food insecurity. And Darius Williams, a first-generation college student whose engineering innovations were already drawing attention from major tech firms. Each story reinforced my conviction that I was making the right choice. These young people didn't just need financial assistance, they needed belief in their potential, investment in their dreams, champions for their aspirations. Everything I had once hoped to provide for Dresden and, later, for my grandchildren. I was deep in conversation with a young woman pursuing architectural preservation when a familiar voice spoke from behind me. Josephine Merritt. Twice in as many days. What a pleasant surprise. I turned to find Judge Westbrook, impeccable in a classic tuxedo, his wife Imogen equally elegant in a deep emerald gown that complemented her silver hair. Judge Westbrook, Mrs. Westbrook, how lovely to see you again. Please, call me Atticus, he insisted. And this is Imogen. Formality has its place, but among people with shared passions, I prefer directness. Atticus and Imogen, then, I agreed. And you must call me Josephine. Imogen's smile was warm, her handshake firm. Atticus mentioned meeting you yesterday. He was quite impressed by your insights on market volatility. Your husband is generous in his assessment, I demurred. We barely scratched the surface of the topic. Which is why I'm hoping we might continue that conversation, Atticus said. Particularly as it relates to the Foundation's endowment strategy. Evelyn mentioned you have some thoughts on the matter. A few preliminary ideas, I acknowledged, though tonight might not provide the ideal setting for detailed financial discussions. Perhaps lunch next week, then? He suggested. We could... He was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. I turned to see Dresden and Cordelia being greeted by the reception staff, their expressions a study in barely contained anxiety. They scanned the room with the focused intensity of hunters tracking elusive prey. Atticus followed my gaze. Isn't that your son and daughter-in-law? I understood they were hosting a Christmas dinner this evening. As did I replied mildly. Imogen's eyes narrowed slightly as she observed them. How interesting that they've chosen to attend instead. Before I could respond, Evelyn Thornfield approached our group, her expression bright with purpose. Josephine, we're ready for the announcement whenever you are. And Judge Westbrook, Mrs. Westbrook, would you do us the honor of joining Josephine on stage? As our founding benefactor, your presence would be particularly meaningful tonight. Atticus looked momentarily puzzled but nodded his agreement. Of course, though I'm not entirely sure. Wonderful. Evelyn beamed. Let's proceed, shall we? Everyone is quite eager to hear the news. As we made our way toward the small stage at the far end of the ballroom, I caught sight of Dresden finally locating me in the crowd. His relief was palpable, even from a distance. He nudged Cordelia and began moving in my direction, only to stop abruptly when he realized where I was headed. Evelyn tapped a crystal glass with a silver spoon, the clear tone gradually quieting the room. Distinguished guests, scholars, and friends of the Thornfield Foundation, thank you for joining our annual holiday celebration. Tonight is particularly special, as we have an unprecedented announcement that will shape the future of our organization for generations to come. The room focused its collective attention on the stage where Evelyn stood, flanked by Atticus, Imogen, and myself. From my elevated position, I could clearly see Dresden and Cordelia hovering at the edge of the crowd, confusion evident in their postures. For 30 years, Evelyn continued, the Thornfield Scholarship Foundation has provided educational opportunities to exceptional students facing financial barriers. In that time, we've supported over 1,200 scholars, many of whom are with us tonight. She gestured toward the young people I'd met earlier, who stood a little straighter at her acknowledgement. Our work has been made possible through the extraordinary generosity of our founding benefactor, Judge Atticus Westbrook. She turned toward Atticus with genuine admiration. His vision created not just a scholarship program, but a community of mutual support and shared purpose. Polite applause filled the room. Atticus inclined his head modestly. "Tonight," Evelyn's voice took on a note of barely contained excitement, "we are honored to announce a transformative gift that will exponentially expand our capacity. Please join me in expressing profound gratitude to Mrs. Josephine Merritt, who has pledged $20 million to establish the Merritt Endowment Fund for Educational Access." A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom, followed by thunderous applause. I maintained a composed smile, though I couldn't help glancing toward Dresden and Cordelia. Their expressions had transformed from confusion to shock, mouths, literally, agape as they processed the sum Evelyn had just announced so casually. Atticus turned to me, genuine surprise and respect in his eyes. "$20 million, he murmured, extending his hand. "Josephine, this is extraordinary." I accepted his handshake with a modest nod. "Education opened every door in my life, Atticus. I'm simply passing forward the opportunity." Evelyn invited me to the microphone. I stepped forward, the room quieting once more. "Thank you for that generous introduction, Evelyn. My connection to the Thornfield Foundation is relatively recent, but its mission resonates deeply with my personal experience." I paused, gathering my thoughts. I was fortunate to receive a scholarship that changed the trajectory of my life, taking me from a childhood of financial insecurity to a career in financial management that ultimately provided security for my family and others. I could see Dresden shifting uncomfortably in the periphery of my vision. This gift honors that legacy of opportunity. The Merit Endowment will specifically support students who demonstrate exceptional promise but lack traditional support systems, those aging out of foster care, those who have lost parents, those facing extraordinary challenges on their educational journeys. Nodding heads throughout the audience indicated the message was resonating. In addition, I continued, I'm pleased to announce a special initiative within the endowment, the Merit Legacy Scholarships. These will provide full tuition, housing, and mentorship for 3 students annually who demonstrate both academic excellence and a commitment to serving others. The first recipients will be selected next fall. More applause followed. I waited for it to subside before delivering my final point. Judge Westbrook often speaks of creating ripples that extend beyond our immediate reach. My hope is that this gift creates such ripples, not just by supporting individual students, but by reinforcing the foundational belief that investing in education is investing in our collective future. I turned toward Atticus and Imogen. It's an honor to join you in this vital work. As I stepped back from the microphone, Atticus moved forward to embrace me in a brief but warm hug that elicited another round of applause. The gesture wasn't just personal. It was public affirmation, the establishment's elder statesman welcoming me into the inner circle of meaningful philanthropy. Evelyn concluded the formal announcements, inviting guests to continue celebrating while the string quartet resumed playing. As we descended from the stage, I was immediately surrounded by well-wishers offering congratulations and appreciation. Through the crush of people, I caught glimpses of Dresden and Cordelia engaged in intense whispered conversation, their expressions cycling through shock, disbelief, and something approaching panic. I didn't seek them out. If they wished to speak with me, they would need to take that initiative. Instead, I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and allowed myself to be drawn into conversation with Atticus, Imogen, and several Foundation board members, eager to discuss how my gift might be leveraged for maximum impact. The endowment structure you've proposed is remarkably sophisticated, Atticus noted. I'm particularly impressed by the sustainability measures you've incorporated. Financial stability ensures longevity, I replied. I wanted to create something that would outlast all of us. Imogen studied me with thoughtful eyes. A legacy. Gift of this magnitude is deeply personal, Josephine. May I ask what inspired your decision? Before I could formulate a suitably diplomatic response, Dresden and Cordelia finally managed to navigate through the crowd to reach our group. Dresden's smile was strained, his voice pitched slightly too high. Mom, what an amazing surprise! We had no idea you were planning something so significant. Cordelia's expression was equally forced, her tone brittle with artificial enthusiasm. Josephine, this is extraordinary. Why didn't you tell us? I offered them a serene smile. Some announcements benefit from the proper setting. Atticus extended his hand to Dresden. Mr. Blackett, Mrs. Blackett, we missed you at the reception yesterday. I was looking forward to continuing our conversation about architecture and social responsibility. Dresden looked momentarily confused. Reception? At your home, Atticus clarified. The cocktail hour before your Christmas dinner. Oh, yes, of course, Dresden stammered. We were just so overwhelmed with preparations for today. Atticus's bushy eyebrows rose slightly. Today? I understood you were hosting an important Christmas dinner this evening. Your mother mentioned she couldn't join you due to her commitment to the foundation. Dresden and Cordelia exchanged panicked glances. Well, yes, originally, Cordelia began. But when we realized how important this event was to Josephine, naturally we rearranged our plans. Family comes first, after all. How admirable, Imogen commented, her tone neutral but her gaze penetrating. Especially on such short notice. Your other guests must have been quite understanding. Completely, Cordelia assured her with a brittle laugh. Everyone agreed that supporting Josephine tonight was the priority. Atticus nodded slowly, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. Indeed, when one discovers that a family member is making a $20 million charitable contribution, priorities do tend to shift rather dramatically. Dresden flinched almost imperceptibly at the implied criticism. Mom has always been extraordinarily generous. We're just amazed at the scale of this particular gesture. 20 million is certainly significant, Atticus agreed, though perhaps not surprising from someone with your mother's financial acumen. Her investment strategies at Westlake were legendary. Absolutely, Dresden nodded vigorously. Mom's always been brilliant with money. Always. I sipped my champagne, observing this performance with detached interest. The desperate scrambling, the transparent attempts to align themselves with my newly revealed resources. It was both predictable and somewhat sad. Where are the children this evening? I inquired, genuinely curious about my grandchildren's whereabouts. Dresden blinked rapidly. They're with Cordelia's aunt. We thought, given the formal nature of the event. A shame, Imogen interjected. Our grandchildren always attend the foundation reception. The scholars' stories are so inspiring for young people. Next year, definitely, Cordelia promised quickly. We'd love for them to be more involved with the foundation, especially now that it's so connected to our family. Atticus's expression remained impassive, but something in his eyes suggested he was taking Cordelia's measure and finding it wanting. Indeed, the Thornfield Foundation has always emphasized intergenerational involvement. My own children and grandchildren have found their participation deeply meaningful. A slight commotion near the entrance drew our attention. A striking woman with silver-streaked black hair had arrived, her presence causing a ripple of recognition through the crowd. She moved with the unhurried confidence of someone accustomed to being noticed, but unbothered by the attention. Cordelia's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Is that Esmeralda Torres? I believe it is, I confirmed mildly. Professor Kaminsky mentioned she might attend tonight. Esmeralda Torres? Atticus looked intrigued. The architectural designer? I thought she rarely left her studio in Spain. She makes exceptions for certain occasions, I explained. She and I share some professional interests. Cordelia's complexion had taken on an alarming pallor. You know Esmeralda Torres personally? We've had some illuminating correspondence. Recently, I replied, watching realization dawn in Cordelia's eyes. In fact, I believe she's particularly interested in meeting you, Cordelia. Your work has apparently caught her attention. Cordelia's glass trembled slightly. My work? The Harrington estate renovation featured in Architectural Horizon. Last month, I clarified, Esmeralda found certain elements quite familiar. Dresden glanced between us, clearly sensing danger but not understanding its source. Cordelia's designs have been very well received. Multiple publications have featured them. Yes, they have, I agreed. Though I understand attribution can sometimes be a complex issue in creative fields. Before Cordelia could respond, Esmeralda Torres herself approached our group, her dark eyes immediately focusing on Cordelia with laser-like intensity. Mrs. Blackett, I presume? Her accent was subtle but distinctive. Your recent work has been brought to my attention. I find myself intrigued by certain similarities to my own designs from 2018. Cordelia's smile was frozen, her voice barely audible. Ms. Torres, what an unexpected honor. I'm a great admirer of your work. Evidently, Esmeralda replied dryly. Perhaps we might discuss the extent of your admiration in a more private setting? I've reserved a small conference room adjacent to the ballroom. Professor Kaminsky has kindly agreed to join us. The implied threat hung in the air between them. Cordelia looked desperately toward Dresden, who appeared equally adrift in the suddenly treacherous social waters. I'm sure any similarities are purely coincidental, Dresden offered weakly. Aesthetic influences are often unconscious. Indeed, Esmeralda cut him off smoothly, which is why documentation is so essential in creative fields. My attorney has prepared quite an interesting comparison between Mrs. Blackett's published designs and my own proprietary concepts from several years ago. The parallels are remarkable. Atticus and Imogen observed this exchange with the careful neutrality of experienced social navigators, though I noted Imogen's slight nod of approval at Esmeralda's directness. Perhaps we should continue this discussion elsewhere, I suggested, gently. Tonight's focus should remain on the Foundation's work. Esmeralda inclined her head in gracious acknowledgement. Of course. My apologies for introducing a professional matter at such an event. She turned to Cordelia. We will speak later, yes? My attorney will be in touch to arrange a suitable time. With that, she glided away, leaving Cordelia visibly shaken. Dresden placed a protective arm around his wife's shoulders, his expression oscillating between confusion and nascent anger. Mom, he began in a low, intense voice. What exactly is happening here? I regarded him calmly. I believe what's happening is truth, Dresden. Something in short supply recently. Before he could respond, Evelyn Thornfield approached once. More, her expression bright with purpose. Josephine, there are several board members eager to discuss the mentorship component of your gift. Would you mind joining us for a few moments? Not at all, I replied, setting down my empty champagne glass. I turned to Dresden and Cordelia. If you'll excuse me, duty calls. Mom, wait, Dresden protested. We need to talk. Yes, I agreed. We certainly do. But not here and not now. Perhaps tomorrow, when you're meant to come to my home for our belated Christmas celebration. The children are still expecting that, I assume. He swallowed hard. Of course, we'll be there. Excellent. 3 o'clock then. I nodded politely to Atticus and Imogen. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to our lunch next week. Art! As I walked away with Evelyn, I felt a curious lightness, as if I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying for years without fully acknowledging its weight. Behind me, I could sense Dresden and Cordelia's bewilderment, They're scrambling to reassess everything they thought they knew about me and about themselves. The evening continued its elegant progression. Champagne flowed, the string quartet played, relationships formed and reformed in the fluid social alchemy that events like this were designed to facilitate. I moved through it with newfound ease, no longer measuring my words or monitoring my demeanor to ensure I appeared sufficiently grateful for inclusion. Later, as the reception wound down, Atticus sought me out once more. "Josephine, before you leave, Imogen and I would be honored if you'd join us for Christmas dinner tomorrow evening. Nothing elaborate, just family and a few close friends. Your grandchildren would be most welcome, of course." I considered his offer, touched by its sincerity. "That's very kind, Atticus. Let me see how tomorrow unfolds with my family. I may take you up on that invitation." He nodded, understanding the complexities beneath my measured response. "The invitation stands, regardless. And Josephine." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "What you've done tonight goes beyond mere philanthropy. You've reaffirmed what matters most: integrity, purpose, vision. Not everyone recognizes those values, but those who do cherish them." "Thank you," I replied simply. "Coming from you, that means a great deal." As I collected my wrap and prepared to leave, I caught sight of Dresden and Cordelia near the exit, their earlier confidence replaced by something approaching defeat. Dresden's shoulders were slumped, Cordelia's perfect posture abandoned. They were engaged in intense discussion with a man I recognized as her father, whose expression suggested he was delivering unwelcome news rather than receiving it. I didn't approach them. Some reckonings needed to occur without an audience, even a maternal one. Instead, I slipped quietly through a side exit, the cold December air crisp against my face as I waited for the valet to bring my car. Stars punctuated the clear night sky, distant and brilliant. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, explanations to be offered, truths to be acknowledged, relationships to be redefined on more honest terms. My grandchildren deserved to understand what had transpired, in age-appropriate ways that preserved their love for their parents while establishing healthier boundaries for the future. As for Dresden and Cordelia, I harbored no illusions about dramatic transformations or tearful reconciliations. People rarely change their fundamental nature, especially when that nature has been reinforced by years of unchallenged entitlement. But perhaps they might begin to recognize that true wealth isn't measured in accounts or possessions or social connections, but in the integrity with which one navigates life's complex choices. Driving home through the quiet streets, I found myself humming along with the classical music on the radio, Vivaldi's Winter from the Four Seasons, its crystalline notes perfectly capturing the clarity I now felt. I had reclaimed not just my financial agency, but something far more precious: my dignity, my purpose, my rightful place in the world, not as an aging inconvenience, but as a woman of consequence acting in alignment with her deepest values. Christmas Day would dawn with new realities, new possibilities, new boundaries. But whatever it brought, I would face it with the quiet confidence of someone who had finally, after decades of giving, learned the most important lesson of all. That self-respect is the one gift no one else can provide or take away. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold, sunlight gleaming across fresh snow that had fallen overnight. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, watching cardinals flit between snow-laden branches in the park across the street. Vibrant splashes of red against pristine white. The contrast seemed fitting for a day that would likely bring its own stark juxtapositions. I'd slept remarkably well considering the events of the previous evening. Perhaps clarity brings its own form of peace. Once decisions are made and actions taken, the anxiety of indecision falls away. Whatever the reason, I felt refreshed, centered, ready for what would undoubtedly be a challenging day. After breakfast, I began preparing for my family's visit. Though I suspected Dresden and Cordelia might attempt to cancel, the children would insist on seeing me. Their expectations of our traditional second Christmas celebration would be impossible to dismiss without raising questions they weren't prepared to answer. I set out the ingredients for our annual Christmas cookie decorating. Emerson favored intricate geometric patterns. Marlowe preferred celestial themes, and Zadie could usually be counted on to create wildly imaginative scenes involving improbable combinations of holiday elements and dinosaurs. The thought of their concentrated expressions as they worked brought a genuine smile to my face. My phone chimed with a text message. A photograph appeared, Atticus and Imogen Westbrook seated before an elegant Christmas tree raising coffee mugs in a toast. The accompanying message read, "Merry Christmas, Josephine. Our invitation remains open. Dinner at 6. No pressure, but know you're welcome." I sent a warm reply thanking them for their thoughtfulness, leaving my options open. At noon, another message arrived, this one from Dresden. "Mom, slight change of plans. Coming at 4 instead of 3. Hope that's okay." I knew it wasn't a request, but an attempt to shorten their obligatory visit. "The children will be disappointed to have less time for cookie decorating," I replied. "But I understand if you have other commitments." His response came quickly. "Actually, we're going to the Westbrooks for dinner at 6. Judge Westbrook called this morning and insisted. Said it wouldn't be the same without you there too." So that was it. Not a cancellation, but a recalibration. Having discovered both my financial status and my connection to the Westbrooks, Dresden and Cordelia had pivoted from excluding me to attempting to leverage my newfound social capital. The irony might have been amusing if it weren't so transparent. "How thoughtful of them," I texted back. "I received the same invitation. Let's discuss when you arrive." I spent the next few hours wrapping additional small gifts for the children and preparing the cookie decorating station. At precisely 3:58, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find my grandchildren on the threshold, their faces bright with excitement, despite the tension emanating from their parents standing behind them. "Grandma Jo!" Zadie launched herself into my arms. "Merry Christmas twice!" "Merry Christmas twice, sunshine!" I laughed, hugging her tightly before extending my embrace to include Marlowe and Emerson. "Come in, all of you. There's hot chocolate waiting, and the cookie station is ready for artists." The children bustled past me, shedding coats and boots with practiced efficiency. Dresden and Cordelia followed more slowly, their expressions carefully composed. Cordelia had opted for a cashmere sweater in a festive cranberry shade, while Dresden wore the forest green cardigan I'd given him last Christmas, a strategic choice, I suspected, meant to signal familial connection. "Mom," Dresden began once. The children were occupied in the kitchen. "About yesterday?" I raised a hand gently. "The children are excited about their traditions. Let's focus on making this visit enjoyable for them. We can speak privately later." Relief flooded his features. He'd been dreading the confrontation, preparing explanations and justifications that would now have to wait. Cordelia's expression remained more guarded, her posture rigid with barely contained anxiety. The potential issues with Esmeralda Torres clearly weighed heavily on her mind. "Of course," Dresden agreed quickly. "Family first, right?" I merely nodded, then led them into the kitchen where the children had already claimed their stations at the table. Emerson was meticulously organizing colored sprinkles by size. Marlowe was sketching cookie designs on a notepad, and Zadie was attempting to convince both siblings that cookies shaped like reindeer absolutely should wear tiny sunglasses made of candy. "Those reindeer are vacationing in the tropics after their big night," I suggested, joining Zadie's creative narrative. "They've earned a beach holiday." "Exactly," Zadie beamed. "See? Grandma gets it." Cordelia's phone chimed. She glanced at it, her expression tightening. "Excuse me," she murmured, stepping into the hallway. For the next hour, We immersed ourselves in the creative chaos of cookie decorating. Dresden gradually relaxed, even joining in with his own precisely executed snowflake designs that revealed the architectural precision he'd inherited from me. Cordelia returned from her call looking even more strained but made a visible effort to participate, though her attention remained fragmented. When the decorating was complete and the kitchen restored to reasonable order, I suggested the children might like to open their gifts. We moved to the living room where my modest tree stood adorned with ornaments collected over decades, many handmade by Dresden in his childhood, others gathered during travels or gifted by friends over the years. "Your tree has so much more personality than ours," Marlowe observed, examining a hand-painted glass ball from Prague. "Ours is pretty, but it looks like it belongs in a department store window." "Different styles for different purposes," I replied diplomatically. "Your mother has excellent aesthetic sense for creating beautiful spaces." Cordelia glanced up sharply, perhaps expecting sarcasm, but finding none in my tone, she relaxed marginally. "Thank you, Josephine, though I must admit, there's something appealing about a tree with history." The gift exchange proceeded with genuine delight from the children. I'd chosen their presents with particular care this year. For Emerson, a telescope with accompanying star charts and a journal for recording observations. For Marlowe, a chemistry set specifically designed for environmental science experiments. And for Zadie, an elaborate storytelling kit with puppets, costume pieces, and a digital recorder for preserving her imaginative tales. "These are perfect," Marlowe breathed, already paging through the experiment guide. "How did you know exactly what I wanted?" "I listen," I said simply. "And I remember." Dresden shifted uncomfortably, perhaps recognizing the subtle distinction between hearing and listening, between noting preferences and truly understanding desires. The children presented me with their own gifts, a hand-knitted scarf from Zadie in a riot of mismatched colors, a collection of pressed flowers from Marlowe arranged in a frame she'd made herself, and from Emerson, a carefully constructed photo album documenting our adventures at the lake cabin over the past year. "This must have taken weeks," I said, turning the pages of Emerson's album with genuine emotion. He shrugged, though his pride was evident. "I worked on it whenever I stayed." Over. Dad helped me scan some of the older photos. I glanced at Dresden, who managed a small smile. "It was his idea entirely. I just helped with the technical aspects." From Dresden and Cordelia came an expensive bottle of perfume, lovely, but impersonal, clearly selected without particular thought to my preferences. I thanked them warmly nonetheless, recognizing it for what it was. A placeholder gift chosen during a time when they believed I occupied a very different position in their lives. As the afternoon progressed toward evening, the inevitable discussion of dinner plans could no longer be deferred. Dresden cleared his throat during a lull in conversation. "Mom, about tonight's arrangements." "Yes," I interjected smoothly. "Judge Westbrook was kind enough to invite me to join his family dinner. I understand you've received a similar invitation." "We have," Dresden confirmed, his relief at my apparent acceptance evident. "It was quite unexpected, but of course, we're honored. The children are invited as well." "How thoughtful," I nodded. Emerson looked up from his telescope assembly. "Wait, so we're all going to Judge Westbrook's house for Christmas dinner? But I thought—" "Plans change, Em," Dresden cut in quickly. "This is a wonderful opportunity for all of us." Marlowe's brow furrowed. "But yesterday you said—" "That was yesterday," Cordelia interrupted, her voice brittle with false brightness. "And today, we have a lovely invitation that includes everyone." I observed the children's confusion with quiet concern. They were old enough to recognize inconsistency, to sense when adults were being less than truthful. The moment called for candor, appropriately framed. "Your parents originally had different plans for Christmas dinner," I explained gently. "They were invited to an event they believed was for adults only. Yesterday they learned that wasn't—" the case, which opened the possibility for all of us to attend together. Dresden shot me a grateful look for the diplomatic framing. Cordelia's relief was equally palpable. So, we get to have Christmas dinner with Grandma Jo after all? Zadie asked, her face brightening. If Grandma wants to come? Dresden replied, glancing at me with ill-concealed anxiety. The subtext was clear. My attendance was now vital to their social aspirations. I'm considering it, I said truthfully. It was very kind of Judge Westbrook to include me. Of course they included you, Emerson said matter-of-factly. You're basically famous now. Marlowe showed me the article about your donation on her tablet this morning. Dresden's head snapped toward Marlowe. What article? Marlowe shrugged. It was on the Thornfield Foundation website. Historic Donation Transforms Scholarship Program. There's a whole press release with Grandma's photo and everything. The foundation works quickly, I remarked. I hadn't expected media coverage quite so soon. There's coverage beyond the foundation website, Cordelia said tightly. The business section of the Tribune has an article as well. My father called this morning to ask if we knew about your substantial gift. The tension in the room thickened. The children, sensing the undercurrents, exchanged glances. Perhaps we should continue this conversation privately, I suggested, nodding toward the kitchen. We'll finish setting up the telescope, Emerson offered, clearly eager to escape the brewing adult discussion. Marlowe and Zadie quickly agreed, gathering their gifts and retreating to the far corner of the living room. In the kitchen, Dresden immediately turned to me, his expression a complex mixture of confusion, hurt, and calculation. Mom, why didn't you tell us about the money? $20 million. That's not just savings, that's a fortune. How long? Have you been keeping this from us? The accusatory tone was striking, coming from someone who had, just days earlier, excluded me from a family holiday. I wasn't keeping it from you, Dresden. My financial affairs are my private business, just as yours are yours. But we're family, he protested. Families share these things. Do they? I asked mildly. You've never shared your salary details with me. Cordelia has never discussed her business revenues. Why would my finances be communicated differently? Cordelia's laugh held no humor. Because $20 million isn't a detail, Josephine. It's life-changing wealth. Wealth that could have... She stopped abruptly. Could have what? I prompted. Benefited you directly instead of funding. Educational opportunities for deserving students? Is that what you're suggesting? Dresden at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. That's not what she meant. Isn't it? I challenged gently. Let's be honest with each other, finally. You assumed my modest lifestyle reflected modest means. You accepted my financial assistance when offered but never inquired about my own security or future. And when you believed I had nothing left to contribute monetarily, you determined I wasn't worth including in your holiday celebrations. That's not fair, Dresden began, but the protest sounded hollow even to his own ears. What's not fair, I continued, is discovering that the family I've supported emotionally, practically and financially for decades, considers me disposable when I'm no longer perceived as useful. That's the true unfairness here, Dresden, not my private financial decisions. Cordelia's posture had become increasingly rigid as our conversation progressed. Now she spoke, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. And what about Esmeralda Torres? Was that your doing as well? I met her gaze steadily. If you're asking whether I informed her about the striking similarities between her proprietary designs and your published work? Yes. She deserved to know. You deliberately sabotaged my career, she hissed. Do you have any idea what this could do to my reputation? To our standing in the community? I didn't sabotage anything, Cordelia. I simply facilitated transparency. Your decisions regarding other designers' intellectual property created this situation. not my actions in response to it. Dresden looked between us, clearly struggling to keep pace with the implications. Wait, what exactly is happening with Esmeralda Torres? Cordelia's flush deepened. It's a misunderstanding. A matter of parallel creative development. These things happen in design. These particular things happen to be potential copyright infringement, I noted. But that's a separate issue from our current discussion. The point remains. When you believed I had nothing of material value to offer, I became expendable to you both. That reality can't be undone by yesterday's revelation about my finances. Dresden ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. So this is punishment? Giving away the money that should have been our inheritance? Humiliating us in front of the Westbrooks? Is that your goal here? His words revealed so much about his perspective, the automatic assumption that my assets were rightfully their inheritance, the belief that my independent actions constituted punishment rather than autonomy. It was illuminating and deeply saddening. This isn't about punishment, Dresden, I said quietly. It's about alignment. My resources should support my values. The Thornfield Foundation's mission of educational access reflects what I believe matters most in this world. My decision honors that belief. And what about your belief in family? He challenged. In supporting your own flesh and blood? I've supported you consistently throughout your life, I reminded him. Your education, your first home down payment, your business ventures, I've contributed to them all without hesitation. What I won't support is being valued only for what I can provide materially or practically. That's not family, that's transaction. Cordelia's phone chimed again. She glanced at it, her expression darkening further. Wonderful. My father says the design community is already buzzing about Torres's accusations. Apparently, she's scheduled a press conference for tomorrow. Dresden turned to her, his voice lowered but still audible. Is there any truth to what she's saying? Did you actually copy her designs? The fact that he had to ask, that he couldn't automatically defend his wife's professional integrity, spoke volumes. Cordelia's resulting silence spoke even more. I decided to offer them a path forward, not out of obligation but compassion. Esmeralda values authentic acknowledgement above all else. A public statement recognizing her influence on your work, with appropriate financial compensation for past projects, would likely resolve the situation without legal proceedings. Cordelia's head snapped up. You seem remarkably well informed about her preferences. We've had several productive conversations, I acknowledged. She's more reasonable than her reputation suggests, provided she's treated with professional respect. Dresden looked between us, clearly calculating angles and implications. And if Cordelia makes this acknowledgement, would you consider revisiting your decisions about the foundation donation? Maybe allocate some portion to a family trust instead? The naked transactionality of his proposal confirmed everything I'd come to understand about our relationship. There was no recognition of wrongdoing, no genuine remorse, just strategic repositioning based on updated information. The donation is finalized, I said simply. The documents were executed last week. But that doesn't mean I have nothing left to give. I paused, allowing that statement to register. My home, my personal possessions, and yes, a significant reserve fund remain within my control. How those assets are eventually distributed depends entirely on the nature of our relationship moving forward. Hope flickered in Dresden's eyes. Not hope for reconciliation or understanding, but for financial salvation. It was both predictable and profoundly disappointing. We should get ready for dinner at the Westbrooks, I continued, glancing at my watch. The children will need time to change, and I should freshen up as well. Then you'll come? Dresden asked quickly. I haven't decided, I replied honestly. It depends on whether I believe my presence would contribute positively to the evening. For the children's sake, I'm inclined to attend, but I won't participate in any pretense of family harmony that doesn't exist. Cordelia's practical nature reasserted itself. What exactly does that mean for tonight? It means I won't pretend we haven't had this conversation, I explained. I won't engage in false displays of familial closeness for social advantage. I'll be cordial and appropriate, nothing more or less. Dresden looked ready to protest, but Cordelia laid a restraining hand on his arm. That's reasonable, she conceded, surprising me slightly with her pragmatism. We should focus on making this evening positive for the children. I nodded in agreement, and we returned to the living room where the grandchildren had successfully assembled the telescope and were taking turns peering through it at the early evening sky, despite the limitations of viewing through a window. Time to prepare for dinner, Dresden announced, his voice forcefully cheerful. We need to leave in about 45 minutes to reach the Westbrooks' home by 6. As the children gathered their gifts and prepared to change for dinner, I pulled Emerson aside briefly. Are you comfortable with these new arrangements? I know sudden changes can be disconcerting. He studied me with surprising perception for a 12-year-old. Is everything okay between you and Dad? You both seem different. We're navigating some adult discussions, I answered truthfully. Nothing for you to worry about, but yes, things are a bit complicated right now. He nodded solemnly. Because of the money you gave away? Marlowe says it was enough to buy like 50 mansions. Partly that, I acknowledged, but more because of what the money represents. Sometimes adults forget what truly matters, and it takes time to remember. Like how Dad and Mom said you couldn't come to Christmas dinner yesterday, but now everyone wants you to come? I shouldn't have been surprised by his awareness. Children absorb far more than adults typically credit. Something like that? Yes. He considered this, then reached a decision. I think you should come tonight. Not for Dad or for fancy Judge Westbrook, but for us. It's still Christmas, and you're still our grandmother. His simple, honest framing cut through the complexities to the heart of the matter. Thank you, Emerson. That's exactly the perspective I needed. He shrugged, momentarily embarrassed by the emotional exchange. Plus, Zadie would probably cry all through dinner if you didn't come, and that would be super annoying. I laughed, squeezing his shoulder affectionately. Well, we certainly can't have that. I'll see you all at the Westbrooks then. As my family departed to change for dinner, I stood alone in my living room, surrounded by discarded wrapping paper and the sweet scent of frosted cookies. The day had brought difficult truths into the open, painful realities about how my son and daughter-in-law valued me, about the transactional nature of what they considered family. Yet alongside those harsh revelations came unexpected gifts. The genuine love of my grandchildren, the respect of people like Atticus and Imogen Westbrook who valued substance over appearance, and most importantly, my own rediscovered sense of worth independent of others' assessment. I moved toward my bedroom to prepare for the evening, pausing to text Atticus. I'll join you for dinner after all. Looking forward to it. Whatever the night might bring, uncomfortable moments, strategic maneuvering from Dresden and Cordelia, or genuine connection with new friends, I would face it with the clear-eyed honesty that comes from knowing exactly where one stands. For the first time in years, that standing was defined by my own values rather than others' expectations. It felt, in the truest sense, like a gift worth celebrating. The Westbrook estate occupied nearly 12 acres of prime lakefront property in Willowbrook Heights, its Georgian architecture softened by strategic landscaping that had matured over 3 decades. As I navigated my car along the private drive lined with centuries-old oak trees wrapped in white lights, memories surfaced from decades past, when Rowan and I had attended social functions here during the early years of my career. The house hadn't changed, though the current generation of Westbrooks had modernized the interior while preserving its historic character. I arrived deliberately 15 minutes after Dresden and Cordelia, wanting to observe their initial reception, without my presence. Through the frost-kissed windows, I could see figures moving in the grand salon, the warm glow of chandeliers creating a tableau of elegant holiday gathering. Taking a deep breath of crisp December air, I approached the front entrance where a uniformed staff member greeted me with professional warmth. "Mrs. Merritt, Judge Westbrook asked me to escort you directly to the library when you arrived. He mentioned wanting a private word before dinner." The library exceeded even my memories of it. Floor-to-ceiling mahogany shelves holding thousands of volumes, a marble fireplace crackling with actual logs, Persian rugs that muted footsteps into whispers. Atticus Westbrook stood near a globe stand, examining something through a magnifying glass. He looked up at my entrance, setting aside what appeared to be an antique maritime map. "Josephine, thank you for accepting our invitation," he said, crossing the room with extended hands that clasped mine with genuine warmth. "I hope you don't mind this slight delay before joining the others." I wanted a moment to speak privately. "Not at all," I assured him. "Your library is magnificent. I could spend days exploring these shelves." He smiled, gesturing toward a pair of leather wingback chairs positioned before the fire. "Perhaps you'll have that opportunity. But first, there's something I feel you should know about tonight's gathering." Settling into the offered chair, I waited while he poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. "Sherry," he explained, handing me one. "A tradition my father maintained, and one I've continued. He said the best conversations happen before dinner, when minds are fresh but social guards are lowered." "Wise man," I observed, accepting the glass. Atticus studied the fire for a moment before speaking. "Your son and his wife arrived early this evening. During our initial conversation, they expressed considerable surprise at discovering the extent of our acquaintance. They seemed under the impression that yesterday's reception was our first meeting." "I see," I replied carefully. They also shared their version of recent events, how they'd misunderstood the nature of tonight's dinner, how communication issues had resulted in an unfortunate mix-up regarding your inclusion. He paused significantly. Their narrative was quite elaborate, though curiously inconsistent with information I'd received from other sources. "Other sources?" A slight smile played at his lips. "Lucinda Hargrave and I still speak regularly. She mentioned you'd called her recently to inquire about my supposed age restrictions for social gatherings." I nodded, appreciating his directness. I suspected the story I'd been given wasn't entirely accurate. "It wasn't accurate at all," he confirmed. More troublingly, when I gently challenged their account, they attempted to reframe it as a protective measure, that they were shielding you from potentially demanding social situations due to your advancing years. His bushy eyebrows drew together in disapproval. The condescension was quite remarkable. Setting down my sherry, I chose my words carefully. Dresden and Cordelia are navigating complex waters. Professional ambitions, social aspirations, financial pressures. Sometimes people lose sight of fundamental values in pursuit of perceived advancement. Diplomatically stated, Atticus acknowledged. Though I suspect the reality is less charitable. What concerns me, Josephine, is the pattern of behavior I'm observing. Your extraordinary generosity to the Foundation, their sudden reversal regarding your inclusion tonight, the way they've positioned themselves since arriving, it all suggests a relationship based primarily on material considerations. The fire crackled softly in the ensuing silence. Through the closed library doors, I could hear muffled conversation and laughter from other guests gathering in distant rooms. "What concerns me," Atticus continued, "is that they've badly miscalculated both my values and my intelligence. I've built my career on reading people accurately. Your son and daughter-in-law appear to believe they can manipulate perceptions through charm and strategic positioning. They fail to understand that character reveals itself most clearly in how we treat those we perceive as having nothing left to offer us. Hence your father's advice about the significance of pre-dinner conversations? I suggested. He smiled more broadly. Precisely. By the time most people realize they're being evaluated, they've already shown their true nature. He leaned forward slightly. Josephine, I invited you tonight not just as a fellow philanthropist or respected colleague, but because I believe you deserve to be surrounded by people who value you for yourself, not for what you can provide. What transpires this evening may be illuminating, perhaps uncomfortably so, but please know you have genuine friends here. Moved by his consideration, I reached across to briefly touch his hand. Thank you, Atticus. Your kindness means more than you know. He nodded, standing to escort me toward the door. Shall we join the others? I believe dinner will prove educational for all involved. The main salon buzzed with conversation as we entered. Perhaps 40 people had gathered, a mix of established families, younger professionals, and what appeared to be several foundation scholarship recipients. I spotted my grandchildren immediately. Emerson engaged in animated discussion with an elderly gentleman I recognized as a former university chancellor, Marlowe examining an antique telescope with Atticus's granddaughter, and Zadie performing what appeared to be an impromptu theatrical piece for several enchanted adults. Dresden and Cordelia stood near the center of the room, champagne flutes in hand, their postures revealing their attempts to project belonging while battling underlying anxiety. Cordelia wore an ice blue gown that, while beautiful, seemed almost too formal for the occasion, as if she'd dressed for the event she imagined rather than the one actually taking place. Dresden's navy suit was impeccable, his smile practiced, his laugh slightly too loud. Several guests approached to offer congratulations on my foundation gift. A distinguished woman in her 60s, whom Atticus introduced as Dr. Helena Marchmont, head of the Regional Arts Council, clasped my hands warmly. Your generosity will transform countless lives, she said. Though I must confess, I'm equally impressed by the strategic structure of your endowment. The mentorship component is particularly brilliant. As we conversed, I noticed Dresden and Cordelia gradually gravitating closer, clearly wanting to insert themselves into the discussion, but uncertain how to proceed. Finally, Dresden stepped forward during a natural pause. Dr. Marchmont, he interjected smoothly, I don't believe you've met my wife, Cordelia. She's also deeply involved in the arts through her interior design practice. Cordelia extended, her smile bright but strained. Such a pleasure. I've long admired your work with emerging artists. Dr. Marchmont's response was polite but measured. How nice. And your design specialty is? High-end residential primarily, Cordelia replied, though I'm expanding into boutique commercial spaces. In fact, I was just telling Judge Westbrook about my recent feature in Architectural Horizon. Yes, I believe I saw that piece, Dr. Marchmont interrupted mildly. There was some discussion about it at our last board meeting. Several members noted striking similarities to Esmeralda Torres's work. Are you familiar with her portfolio? Cordelia's carefully constructed composure cracked slightly. There may be some superficial resemblances. Parallel creative development is common in design. Indeed, Dr. Marchmont said, her tone neutral, but her gaze sharp. Though I understand Torres herself has expressed concerns about the parallels. She serves on our International Advisory Committee, you know. Quite protective of her intellectual property. Dresden attempted to redirect the conversation. Design influences are so complex, aren't they? Like ripples in water, inspiration flows in many directions. Sometimes, Dr. Marchmont agreed, though plagiarism flows in only one. She turned back to me, effectively dismissing them. Josephine, I'd love to discuss your thoughts on arts education integration with the scholarship program. Perhaps after dinner? As we moved away, I caught Dresden's stricken expression. The evening was not unfolding as he'd envisioned. Rather than gaining social capital through association with me, they were discovering that their own reputations preceded them in ways they hadn't anticipated. Imogen Westbrook appeared at my elbow, resplendent in deep burgundy silk. "The children are delightful," she observed, nodding toward where Zadie was now demonstrating what appeared to be an interpretive dance about snow angels. "Particularly the youngest. Such uninhibited joy." "They're my greatest treasure," I replied sincerely. "And they clearly adore you," she continued. "Though I notice their parents seem anxious about your interactions with other guests. Curious, considering yesterday they were apparently content to celebrate without you entirely." The observation was pointed, but not unkind. "Family dynamics can be complicated," I offered. "Indeed, though some complications are more self-inflicted than others." She guided me toward a quieter corner. "Atticus filled me in on your conversation. I hope you know we see through facades rather quickly in this house. Your son and his wife are performing a version of themselves they think we want to see, failing to understand we'd prefer authenticity to artifice." Before I could respond, a bell chimed softly, and Atticus's voice carried across the room. "Friends, if you would join us in the dining room, dinner is served." The dining room took my breath away. A table that could seat 50 had been set with exquisite care, crystal, china, and silver that spoke of generational wealth handled with appreciation rather than ostentation. Candles in hurricane glasses cast warm light across evergreen garlands, woven with white roses and silver ribbons. Place cards in elegant calligraphy directed guests to their seats. I found myself positioned between Atticus at the head of the table and Dr. Marchmont, with Imogen directly across. Dresden and Cordelia had been placed further down, separated from me by several other guests. The strategic seating wasn't lost on anyone, least of all them. I watched Cordelia's face as she discovered her placement next to a severe-looking woman I later learned was the city's leading intellectual property attorney. The children had been seated at a beautifully appointed adjacent table with other young guests, supervised by what appeared to be a professional childcare team, who kept them engaged while allowing them to feel included in the grander celebration. Zadie caught my eye and waved enthusiastically. I waved back, grateful for her uncomplicated affection. As the first course was served, a delicate butternut squash soup with truffle oil, conversation flowed naturally. Atticus proved a masterful host, guiding discussions that allowed guests to shine while subtly revealing character through their responses. The topics ranged from local politics to international art markets, from educational reform to emerging technologies. Midway through the fish course, Atticus raised a more pointed subject. "I've been reflecting on the nature of legacy," he announced to the table at large. "Not merely what we leave behind materially, but how we shape the world through our choices." Josephine's gift to the foundation exemplifies this perfectly, transforming personal success into communal opportunity. Murmurs of agreement rippled down the table. Dresden seized the opening. "My mother has always been extraordinarily generous," he declared, loudly enough to capture broader attention. "It's a value she instilled in me from childhood. The importance of giving back, of supporting others." "Indeed?" Atticus responded, his tone pleasant, but his gaze sharp. "And how do you personally embody those values, Mr. Blackett?" Dresden faltered slightly. "Well, we contribute to various causes, charitable donations, community support." "Specifics are always illuminating," Atticus pressed gently. "Which causes particularly resonate with you?" The pause that followed was telling. Cordelia attempted to assist. "We've been exploring various philanthropic opportunities, haven't we, darling? In fact, we were just discussing establishing our own foundation to support emerging designers." The intellectual property attorney beside her turned with sudden interest. "How fascinating. Will this foundation emphasize original work, or will it follow the current trend of what some call derivative inspiration?" Cordelia's knuckles whitened around her fork. Original work, naturally. Creativity should always be authentic. Agreed, the attorney continued smoothly. Though I understand there's some controversy in design circles about where inspiration ends and appropriation begins, my firm handles several high-profile cases in that arena. The penalties for infringement can be quite substantial. Dresden attempted another redirect. Speaking of authenticity, Mother, why don't you share some of your early experiences at Westlake? You've never told us much about those pioneering days. The desperation in his voice was palpable, an attempt to shift focus while associating himself with my professional success. I considered briefly before responding. Those early years taught me valuable lessons, I began carefully. Primary among them, integrity matters more than advancement. There were opportunities to cut corners, to claim credit for others' work, to prioritize personal gain over collective good. I chose differently, though it sometimes meant slower progress. And that integrity served you well, Atticus observed. Your reputation for ethical dealing became legendary in financial circles. Ethics are a luxury when you're established, Cordelia interjected, her tone sharper than intended. When you're building something from nothing, sometimes you have to make difficult choices. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Dr. Marchmont raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting ethical compromise is justified by ambition? Realizing her misstep, Cordelia backpedaled hastily. No, of course not. I simply meant that different generations face different challenges. Indeed, I agreed quietly, though I've found that each generation faces the same fundamental choice, whether to build success on solid ground or shifting sand. The consequences of that choice tend to reveal themselves over time. Atticus smoothly guided the conversation to lighter topics, but the damage was done. Throughout the remainder of dinner, Dresden and Cordelia found themselves increasingly isolated, their attempts at integration meeting polite but clear boundaries. The other guests, evidently well briefed on recent events, treated them with courtesy devoid of warmth. After dinner, we moved to the conservatory for coffee and dessert. The glass-enclosed space overlooked gardens illuminated by thousands of tiny lights, creating the impression of dining among stars. Small conversation groups formed naturally, and I found myself surrounded by genuinely interesting people eager to discuss the Foundation's future and potential collaborative projects. Dresden approached during a lull, his expression combining determination and barely concealed panic. Mom, could I speak with you privately for a moment? I excused myself from the group and followed him to a quiet alcove near a fountain whose gentle splashing provided acoustic privacy. This isn't going well, he said without preamble. What specifically troubles you? I asked, though I knew the answer. Everyone here seems to know about everything. The Christmas dinner situation, Cordelia's design issues, even details about our finances I haven't shared with anyone. He ran a hand through his hair. It's like we're on trial, and no one told us the charges. You're not on trial, Dresden. You're experiencing the natural consequences of your choices. The social circles you've been desperate to enter value authenticity and integrity above surface presentations. They've observed how you treat family when you believe there's no material advantage involved. So this is punishment, he said bitterly. A public humiliation orchestrated to teach us a lesson. This is reality, I corrected gently. I neither orchestrated nor desired this situation. You created it through your decisions. What you're experiencing isn't punishment. It's the removal of illusions you've cultivated about how the world works. Before he could respond, Cordelia materialized beside us, her face flushed with wine and frustration. We need to leave, she announced. This entire evening has been a setup. That woman next to me spent 30 minutes discussing intellectual property law while staring directly at me. The Arts Council director basically called me a plagiarist, and everyone keeps mentioning your donation as if it's the second coming. The evening has revealed truths, I acknowledged. Whether you choose to learn from them is entirely your decision. Dresden's jaw tightened. What do you want from us, Mom? A public apology? Groveling? Should we wear sackcloth and ashes? The bitterness in his voice saddened me more than angered me. Even now, he couldn't see beyond transactional thinking. What gesture would restore the status quo? What performance would regain access to resources? I want nothing from you, I said simply. My choices regarding the foundation, my relationships with people here, my plans for the future, none require anything from you. What you do next is entirely for yourselves. And what about the children? Cordelia demanded. Are you planning to cut them off too? Punish them for our supposed sins? The children have a trust fund for their education and the lake cabin, preserved for their future use. They're provided for appropriately. What they won't have is an inheritance that enables the kind of entitlement that's brought us to this moment. Dresden's face cycled through emotions, anger, disbelief, calculation, and finally a dawning recognition that perhaps the situation was irreversible. So that's it? 40 years of being your son and you're writing me off completely? I'm not writing you off, Dresden. I'm acknowledging who you've chosen to become. There's a difference between loving someone and enabling their worst impulses. I will always love you as my son, but I won't continue supporting behaviors that diminish both of us. Emerson appeared around a potted palm, his young face creased with concern. Dad, Mom says we need to leave, but Zadie's in the middle of showing everyone her snow angel dance. Do we have to go right now? The interruption broke the tension. Momentarily. Dresden visibly struggled to compose himself. Let her finish the dance, he said finally. We'll leave in a few minutes. Emerson looked between us, clearly sensing the undercurrents. Grandma, are you coming with us? I'll stay. A bit longer, I told him gently. But I'll see you soon, and we'll plan that camping trip to the cabin we discussed. His face brightened. The meteor shower weekend? Exactly. Just you, me, and the stars. After he departed, Dresden made one final attempt. If you ever cared about us at all. Caring isn't the issue, I interrupted quietly. The issue is what form that caring should take. Sometimes the most loving act is allowing people to experience the full consequences of their choices. Cordelia grabbed Dresden's arm. We're leaving. This conversation is pointless. She turned to me, her composure finally cracking completely. You think you've won something tonight, but all you've done is destroy your own family. I hope that money keeps you warm in your old age. They stalked away, collecting their children with barely concealed urgency. I watched them leave, noting how Zadie turned back to wave, her small face confused by the abrupt departure. Emerson caught my eye once more, his expression suggesting understanding beyond his years. Marlowe, ever observant, seemed to be filing away information for future processing. After their departure, Atticus approached. Are you all right? Surprisingly, yes, I answered honestly. Sad for what could have been, but clear about what is. Clarity is its own comfort, he agreed, though I apologize if tonight proved more confrontational than anticipated. Sometimes people reveal themselves more starkly than we expect. No apologies necessary. Truth has its own schedule. The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly. I found myself engaged in stimulating conversations about art, education, travel, and philosophy with people who valued ideas over appearances. Several guests extended invitations to future gatherings, book clubs, charity committees, the infrastructure of a social world based on shared values rather than calculated advantage. As the evening wound down, Imogen took my hands warmly. You must join us for New Year's Eve, she insisted. A smaller gathering, just close friends and meaningful conversation. I'd be honored, I accepted, recognizing the invitation for what it was: inclusion in a circle that valued authenticity over artifice. Driving home through streets still decorated with holiday lights, I reflected on the evening's revelations. Dresden and Cordelia would likely paint me as the villain in their narrative, the controlling mother who wielded wealth as a weapon. They might never understand that my actions stemmed not from vengeance but from clarity, not from cruelty, but from the recognition that enabling their behavior served no one, least of all themselves. The trust for the grandchildren would ensure their education and preserve the cabin where genuine memories lived. Perhaps, as they matured, they would understand the difference between love that enables and love that elevates. Perhaps Dresden himself might eventually recognize that being excluded from material inheritance had freed him to discover who he might become without the cushion of unearned wealth. Or perhaps not. Some lessons come too late. Some insights remain forever out of reach. What I knew with certainty was that my own path forward was clear. The foundation would carry forward values I cherished. New friendships would provide the warmth of genuine connection. And most importantly, I would face whatever years remained with the dignity of someone who had finally learned that self-respect cannot be bought, sold, or sacrificed for the approval of others, even those we love. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone chimed with a message from Emerson. "Grandma, I put the meteor shower dates in my calendar. Can we practice using the telescope before then? Love you." I smiled, typing back. "Every clear night between now and then. Love you too." Some inheritances transcend money, the gift of time, attention, and authentic love. These I would continue to give freely, not from obligation, but from the joy of genuine connection. The rest, the material concerns that had distorted family relationships, would find their proper place, funding dreams for students who valued opportunity, supporting causes that multiplied compassion in the world. Entering my quiet apartment, I felt neither triumph nor regret, only a deep sense of alignment. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and revelations. Dresden and Cordelia would likely attempt various strategies to restore their position, perhaps legal challenges to the donation, maybe emotional manipulation through the children, possibly even genuine reflection, though that seemed least likely. Whatever came, I would meet it with the steady grace of someone who had finally learned the most valuable lesson of all: that true wealth lies not in what we accumulate, but in who we choose to become. Not in what others think of us, but in the peace that comes from acting with integrity. Outside, snow began to fall softly, each flake unique yet part of a larger pattern. Like the evening's events, like the choices that had brought us all to this moment, like the future now unfolding. Individual elements combining to create something both beautiful and inevitable. I made myself tea, settled into my favorite chair, and opened a book of poetry I'd been meaning to finish. Tomorrow was another day. Tonight, I was exactly where I needed to be, at peace with my choices, clear in my values, and finally, fully free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.